Hey, this is Brooks with Character Design Forge. Usually the pain points when we're learning to draw, they tend to be the head, face, hands, but you may find yourself struggling with arms. So I have a few things to run through with you just to help your understanding of the arms as you draw them, and to hopefully help you to break free of any ruts or bad habits that you may have. And then later, we'll get into wielding these new tools of yours to create better characters. So first things first, the better you understand the physical human anatomy of arms, especially the bone and muscle, the better. I recommend spending some time doing pure studies of the skeletal and muscular buildup of the arms, even if you only intend to draw stylized or simple characters, because that understanding is usually boiled down for the unique style choices that an artist makes. Here's just some brief things to note for our purposes. The arm starts at the shoulder. This junction at the shoulder is a ball and socket joint, which means within the limits of the muscle around it, it can pivot to any position in the socket. The upper arm bone is called the humerus. It's one solid bone and it's slightly longer than the lower portion of the arm. And at the elbow, it only hinges, it doesn't rotate at all. So anytime you rotate your forearm, that's all happening at the shoulder. The forearm is actually two bones, the ulna and radius, and when you flip your wrist over, it actually twists those two bones over top of each other. The two positions of your wrist are called pronate and supinate. Now you know that. That's information that you have. I don't know what you're going to do with it. When it comes to the muscle over the arm, instead of naming them all, really the most important thing to keep in mind is the nature of skeletal muscle. It can only pull or contract in one direction, which means there needs to be an equal and opposite muscle for it to pair with. A muscle when contracted gets bigger, it bunches up, while its partner gets thinner and lays flat. So when someone flexes their bicep, the tricep on the opposite end of the upper arm goes flat. And we can't really flex our triceps in the same way as our biceps because the arm stops bending backwards at the elbow. Also keep in mind that the shoulder has all kinds of muscles wrapped around it in order to move in that ball and socket joint way that we mentioned. And then the muscles in the forearm are there to control the hand and wrist, so really the muscle in each section of the arm is there to influence the next section. Let's talk about drawing the arm. We already mentioned that the upper arm is slightly longer than the forearm. Once you add in the hand though, they tend to break even. A lot of times, people will draw the arm as two straight skinny tubes, and while that may be fine for a certain level of simplicity, if you extend your arm straight out and look down it, you'll notice that it's really not two straight tubes. In fact, because of the layout of the muscle especially, you may actually find that there's a slight curvature in the arm. Now in gesture drawing, we tend to interpret this as an arc out from the body for the upper arm, and then a slight S shape for the forearm. With the arm extended straight out, they look like this. But when bent, you'll see that the forearm kind of breaks that flow and echoes the upper arm shape. You can actually change the direction that the S bends depending on the perspective, especially because this isn't a hard and fast structural rule, but really a gestural help. You'll find if you incorporate this simplified gesture into the drawings of arms that you do, you'll find them coming out a lot more organic. Now, when building up the volume of the arm, to make it appear dimensional, here are a few things that can help. Oftentimes I see newer artists over-defining the muscles and indents that indicate muscles on their characters. What happens then though is that it betrays their lack of knowledge and familiarity with the arm. So when in doubt or unsure of the layout of the muscles, simplify or at least don't over-define them. This is even a good idea from a design perspective if the rest of your character is simplified. There's a certain balance that's good to strike here, especially because you could potentially draw too much attention to an arm and away from the rest of the character. You can communicate similar ideas about the character having muscular arms with simply the silhouette and shape of the arm, rather than including indentation lines for the biceps and complex shading, for example. It's also good to remember that while the interior of the elbow joint can mush around, flex, and bend, either from the muscle or fat around it, the outside of the elbow is always going to be constant. The boundary of the elbow is bone after all, so keep that rigid. Of course, muscle can wrap around it close by, but oftentimes I'll see people maybe draw this junction as two lumps. But remember that it's coming to a point in most levels of detail or stylization, so try and at least think of it as a corner. I've also included some rubber hose style arms down in the bottom left hand corner there because Not all styles require realistic elbows necessarily. But the key there is that there are other details lacking in those arms besides just elbows. The next area that can help you with arms is to think first of where the hands will be, and then fill in the arm position from there. So for example, if I plan to put my hand here, I can create a line from the shoulder to the hand, and then make a T shape out from there to figure out the position of the elbow. Now remember that this won't be perfectly straight, as the upper arm is slightly longer, and you're usually looking at the arm with some amount of perspective. And the farther the hand is from the shoulder, the shorter that T shape is going to be as it extends out. Speaking of that, if you don't already have practice drawing in perspective, keep in mind how foreshortening affects something like the arm, which usually begins and ends in different depths of perspective. That means that the part of the arm closer to the camera or viewer will be larger, and elements further away will be smaller. You can practice by drawing 3 circles of different sizes, one representing the shoulder, one representing the elbow, and one representing the wrist. Then connect the dots between them in a way that makes the arm believable in perspective. When considering the mass of the arm, I think that this visualization is really helpful, of tape strips along the length of the arm, because really they're just the contour lines that you might add yourself to understand the construction of the arm in a really explicit format. Spend some time focusing on the things that we went over in this video to really get the mechanics of the arms down. I've found that the more complicated and detailed you are in your studies of realistic anatomy, the better equipped you are later when stylizing or simplifying down to your comfort level. In part 2, we'll look at ways to stylize the arms to give them character, to exaggerate them, really to accentuate your character designs, as well as how to act the arms, to push expressions and put them in natural-looking positions. If this video is helpful for you, and especially if you're excited for part 2, you can help me out by liking the video, hitting the notification bell, and if you're able to, keep my Forge burning over on Patreon. I'm making new videos every week on Character Design Forge, Tuesdays at 4 p.m. Eastern. My Instagram, Twitter, and Twitch are all Bagel Denizen, and you'll see them in a few seconds. Thank you so much for watching, and have fun creating.